Welcome back to our special edition of Fox 11 Extra Innings. Vin Scully was such a huge part of Dodger history, starting with the team when he was just 25 years old and calling Dodger games, of course, for 67 years. So who better to bring in and spread his knowledge on the legend than Dodger historian Mark Langell? He was on Good Day LA earlier this week.
First off, tell us about working right next to Vin Scully for so many years. He probably taught you a lot about Dodger history.
Well, you're absolutely right. I've been with the Dodger front office 29 years, but it's kind of 50 if you think about transistor radio starting at 7 years old. 50 out of 57 years I've been at the ballpark. A lousy little leaguer, that's how you become team historian. But I hung on Vinny's every word. And there's a warning. Be careful about meeting your heroes. He couldn't have been a greater person. He couldn't have been a greater broadcaster behind the scenes. And he was just the body of work. Buzzy Bavasi, the former general manager for the Dodgers, said no person meant more than Vin Scully in terms of bringing baseball to the West Coast and teaching fans all about this team from Brooklyn and this wonderful sport called baseball. Even if you didn't like the sport, you loved his voice, you loved those little winks and the stories and everything like that. And even though if you didn't know him, you felt like he was your friend, talking to you either on the radio or on the television.
Mark, I saw this report. I want to know how true this is because it really kind of struck me. They talked about how he had all this memorabilia, obviously, over the years, but he actually auctioned everything off. Like, he wasn't attached to anything, not even the World Series ring that he'd worn every day since the World Series. He got rid of everything, and he gave it to charity and to his family.
Absolutely. His world was people. He loved people. He loved the memories. He loved his craft, and that was the most important thing. He was actually embarrassed to be recognized in public and when people would clamor for his autograph, because this was a guy who at age 8, even before they invented the television, wanted to be a sportscaster. And he remembered play-by-play, sitting under the radio and hearing the crowd. And he described it as water washing over him. So later, when he would become the expert at play-by-play, in his own words, he said, "I knew when to shut up." And he would let the crowd tell the voice, tell the story, whether it was the Colfax perfect game, Kirk Gibson, so many of those great moments. What do you hear right afterwards? Seconds and seconds and sometimes minutes of silence, because he wanted that water to wash over the fans of his audience.
You know, Mark, we talk so much about who learned from him, right? You said you hung onto his every word. He wanted to do this since he was 8 years old, starting it, years later and still doing it some 80 years after that very point. If you think about, he had this dream at 8 years old. But who did he learn from? Such a people person, someone who was so gracious. Who did he talk about?
That's a great question, because he was the number 3 announcer in 1950. Red Barber, the voice of the Brooklyn Dodgers since 1942, actually hired him and decided he would tutor him. He was impressed because there was a foul-up at Fenway Park covering a college football game. Vinny never complained to him or on the air, and he said, that's a type of professionalism you just can't teach. And so Barber gave him all the rules and all the regulations, and really, he said that was the important thing. He was probably the son that he never had, and Vin always felt that Red cared, and that was the most important thing. Vinny never had any minor league experience, so how great to be able to learn your craft, just like Sandy Koufax, on-the-job training at the major league level.
So, Mark, I know I always text you about Dodger stats when we're heading into the playoffs or the World Series, and you come back with so much information, but Vin Scully was someone who obviously spanned generations. So what would you tell the next generation of kids who hit you up for information and say, hey, Mark, what could you tell me about Vin Scully? What would you say?
I say, I asked the most famous sportscaster the secret to his success. And he quoted an actor named Laurence Olivier. And I think this advice applies to everyone in every walk of life. Have the humility to prepare and the confidence to pull it off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was one of the skill sets he learned, actually, the fact that you do all the research, no matter at what stage you are in your career, you don't get lazy about it. And that is what led him to the success he had. He genuinely was passionate for what he did.
He had binders full of information, and I was fortunate enough on several occasions to be in the booth just to watch the way he put everything together. And would you believe at the end of the day, he maybe only used 1% of his research because it was a spice, not a crutch. And he knew that that field in front of him was a blank canvas. And every day he went to work to paint a picture for all of us.
A pro.
Wow. And a true artist.
Yes.
The field was his canvas, that's right, and his voice, his instrument.
Mark, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Coming up, Vin teams up with Fox 11 to welcome back baseball. We retooled that Emmy-winning spot in tribute as this edition of Extra Innings rolls on.